that plane. What a douche. Hello guys, and welcome back to Cine Club. My name is Maria, and this is the show where we watch the movies that have recently come out on theaters, and I review them for you. And the movie I saw this week that I've been waiting to see for quite a while, and I didn't manage to get to it on time, but here we are, was 300: Rise of an Empire. So everybody knows how the original 300 ends, and if you don't, shame on you. So this time around, the Greek general Themistocles is going to lead the battle against the Persian army led by the king god Xerxes. You remember that guy, he's pretty hard to forget. And his commander of the navy forces, Artemesia, who is played by Eva Green. So you still have sort of the same basic setup as the first one. The Persian army wants to control and take over everything, whereas Greece just wants to be free and fight until they can make that. But instead of being Spartan this time around, is Athens. And that's pretty much it. The movie starts with a really cool action sequence, and as I am looking at it and I'm trying to understand what's happening and get in touch with the main character, the first reaction was, this is just not as good as the first one. Even though the style is still the same and you have that graphic novel look and the intense colors of blood and blue, and the action sequence slows down just, to make it more intense, I didn't find the story as interesting as the first one. At first it starts as a prequel and they want to show you what Xerxes is all about and how that got started and why they're seeking revenge, but it's also the sequel of the 300 that we all know after that great battle and after all of that happened. But then at the same time, most of the story happens in a parallel time as the Spartans fighting the Persians on the other side. It feels like an add-in little mini story between two video games, that little extra that you want to see just for the fans that contains a little bit more detail, maybe a little extra story that's kind of fun, but not really good on its own. That's what this movie feels like. So what you get is almost like 2 hours of tons of fighting, lots of CGI blood, unnecessary CGI blood, and not a really great story. It just feels like they take the same types of characters in the first movie and then translate them to something else. A leader who's supposed to, keep you interested, and he's rough and badass, and he's going to lead his army towards the Persian Empire, and he's going to beat them. But this guy was no Leonidas. And you got the one he trusts, just another guy from the group. You have the whole father and son relationship, which one of them is going to die in the end, just like the first one. You got the guy with the long hair and the beard. I mean, it just looks almost the same, but I didn't care about any of those characters. I did not care about the main guy. He was okay, but I don't think he's memorable. I have no idea who he is, whereas in the first one, Gerard Butler played King Leonidas, and everybody wanted to know who the guy was, and he was just immediately famous. He was so good in it. What really saves this movie is Eva Green's character, and the way she just carried herself. She was so good as a bad guy, and I never expected that, because she's so gorgeous and just pretty. I mean, she's a good actress, but I've never seen her be so bad. I liked it a lot. And it's the only character who really has a backstory that they let you know, so you actually end up rooting for her. I ended up really liking her and wanting her to win. I didn't care anything about Athens or the Greeks at all. Maybe it's because Zack Snyder didn't direct this one, and I don't understand why he wouldn't. It was directed by this guy named Noan Morrow, but I just didn't feel as involved as I did in the first movie. I wasn't as intrigued by this group of Greek men who were going to fight the big, fearful, Persian Empire. In 300, I feel like you get to know really what Spartans are all about and what their mission is and what they really believe in and what they're going to fight for. And so you really get into the story and you really get into these characters that stick together even though they're few, they're going to fight and they're going to do it, and you really believe that they will. But I just didn't care if they were okay. Certain characters die and you don't feel absolutely anything. It didn't have great character development, so I just didn't really care about any of them, not even the main character. There's nothing that sets the Athenians apart. When you were watching 300, you felt like this is Sparta. Shut up. You were very focused on that and you were very into it. And the Athenians was just like, I don't really care. I really liked that the first one had a mix of political intrigue, and it kept it really well balanced between the fighting and what was going on with this 300 and what was happening back in Sparta. This movie doesn't have that, which sucks because you could have had so much more going on with Athens. The action sequence was good. You get that thrill of the fight and the blood and the victory, but I don't know why. I didn't feel like it was as good as the sequence from the first one. I just feel like they were more memorable, and I don't remember a single part of this one that was like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool. The slow motion is still there, but I just felt like it was much more unnecessary this time around. Like, they did it really constant. like it went from a really fast-paced fight and then boom, you stab somebody and lots of blood comes out, and then fight, and then slow again, and it just went on and on and on and on. Whereas in the first one, I feel like the slow motion really intensified a moment, like the time they're throwing all the guys off a cliff or when all the elephants are falling. But it felt meaningful. It felt like you wouldn't forget those parts, and people still remember those scenes. In this one, it was just kind of unnecessary to do it so often. To be fair, I do think the movie did exactly what it set out to do. It was going to be a fun, reminiscing movie with lots of action and lots of blood, but by no means up to the standards of the first one. So if I had to rate this movie, I would say it's more of a rent on DVD kind of movie. I think it was just as expected. I think it was a second-rate effort of a sequel that took 8 years to make for some reason. Not as many abs or muscles, and definitely a lot more useless slow motion. Yeah, seriously, there are not a lot of abs. I checked. Only Anaya is back. So I hope you enjoyed this review of 300 Rise of an Empire as much as I enjoyed talking to you about it. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up or share it or subscribe for more. So that's it for this episode of Cine Club. My name is Maria. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you on our next movie date. And the movie I saw this week was Monuments Men. Directed by George Clooney, co-written by George Clooney, produced by George Clooney, starring George Clooney.